Ahoy there, you sons of bitches. Welcome to Create and Destroy. I'm your host, Dan Donnarumma. This is episode 42. As always, I am super excited about today's episode and my guest that I have for you guys today. So I was fortunate to have David Fylstra of Folian on the podcast. And David is a super nice guy. Really happy that I was able to get him on the podcast. If you're not familiar with Folian, how would I describe his music? So just recently, in the past couple of weeks, the Folian album Blue Mirror was released. And as I mentioned to David, I totally get Jesu vibes when I listen to that album. Last year, however, he released a 4-song EP called Ache Pillars, and that has more of a slowcore ambient kind of a vibe. And I would say with Blue Mirror, there's some ambient in there, but I get more of that in Ache Pillars. So 2 different kinds of sounds from 2 different kind of releases, and both of them are freaking fantastic. So as I mentioned 2 episodes ago, when I was discussing my favorite releases from 2019, Ache Pillars wound up being my number 16 pick for releases of 2019. It is such a great collection of songs. And as I start to work on putting together my list of releases for 2020, I imagine Blue Mirror is going to be an album that I'm going to continue to come back to throughout the year, and one that's going to wind up being in contention for one of my favorite releases of 2020. It's such a cool album. David was awesome. He and I started talking a couple months back, just kind of shooting the shit about Folian and Ache Pillars, and he actually shared Blue Mirror with me. And upon first listen, I was like, hell yeah, this is an awesome release. And I've been listening to it a lot since then. So yeah, this is definitely going to be an album that I will most definitely continue to go back to as the year progresses on. And my conversation with David was really cool. We talked about Folian. We talked about what went into him creating the songs behind Blue Mirror, because what's interesting, Blue Mirror, those songs wound up being written quite some time before the songs for Ache Pillars, even though Ache Pillars came out first. And so David shared some of the reasons behind that and talked about what went into creating the songs for Blue Mirror. We also had a conversation about northeastern Pennsylvania, the goddamn Poconos. So the day that David and I had scheduled our interview, we were just talking. He sent me his phone number and I saw that his area code was 570, which was an area code that I had when I lived in the Poconos. And come to find out, he lived super close to where I lived in the Poconos. And so we had a conversation about that. We reminisced about venues from the Poconos and the Wilkes-Barre area, which was super fucking cool. I have like a very love-hate sort of feeling about my time that I spent growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania in the Poconos. I lived there from like 12 to 16, 17, and that's when I started to get into hardcore and punk. And so I spent a lot of my time during that age range going to shows in that area. And so I have, like I said, I have a somewhat of a love-hate kind of memory about that time frame, but it was cool to kind of reminisce and talk about some venues from that area and hear David talk about his experience going to shows there as well, which was really cool. Also, David and I did our interview over Skype, and his cat literally was in the background the entire time that we spoke and didn't move a goddamn muscle, and his cat was cute as hell. So shout out to David's cat. So with that said, let's get into it, guys. Here's my conversation with David Fylstra of Folian. Let's rock and roll. So David, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. It's my first day off in what feels like a month after like touring and moving and starting a new job. It's been a wild time.
Your tour literally like just ended. You just got back from tour. So how long were you on tour for?
We went out on the 15th of January. Yeah, that was about 2 weeks. And then we had like 5 days off. And then we did another weekend in the Pacific Northwest, just Portland, Astoria, Seattle, and then got back home.
Is it hard to come back following a tour, like to come back home? Or after the tour's finishing up, are you ready to like get back home and get back to like everyday life?
Normally, like when I toured for like 2 weeks in November, it was really good to get back and to just ease back into my way of life. But this time it was wild because as soon as I got back, I literally had to start packing and moving into a new place like the day after I get back. And then I had like 4 days to complete it before these weekend shows. And I did it. And then I went out for these weekend shows. And then I got back. And then I started this new job. So it was like so much at once. But I am excited for this change. It's much needed, and I'm just adjusting still.
So holy fuck, dude. You literally went to tour, came back home, moved, and started a new job. God damn, dude. So this is like a whole new, I guess, sort of like venture that you're taking on at this point.
Yeah, for sure. This is like a new chapter. Almost, it feels.
I give you credit, dude. I feel like I absolutely hate moving. I've lived in the same apartment now for almost a decade. And like, there's been times where I wanted to move. I'm just like, I fucking hate moving. Like, fuck this. I'll just stay where I'm at.
Yeah. It was a thing where like, you know, I'm in this house with a few other people, friends. And I lived here like for about 1.5 years. And then over this past summer, I moved out. And that situation didn't quite last, so I moved back in.
Damn, man. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because during tour, I was keeping up with what you were doing on Instagram, and you were posting stuff. You were camping, and I thought that was super awesome, and you and I wound up talking a little bit. So how many nights did you wind up camping while you were out on tour?
Depending on how you define camping, almost like every night. We slept in the van a lot just because you know, there's plenty of room in my van to just kind of like recline back. It was just the two of us, my friend Tom, who does Shifting Harbor, and I. And we didn't arrange for places to stay every night. There were some nights when we had friends in certain cities that let us crash. But overall, we were kind of like going into it with the idea of kind of saving money, and we were both comfortable enough with just kind of roughing it and just like sleeping in the van. We get to stay with all our gear. And then for most of the nights we would drive out of the city into like a nearby either like deserted area or a really cool scenic area, and we would just kind of camp out there for the night, maybe make some food, pass out, and then wake up, make coffee, and head to the next city. We had a lot of long drives in between each city. It was fun, but, you know, also so much driving.
I was talking to my wife about this. I was like, I think that's fucking awesome that he's doing this. And one of the things I said to my wife is I feel like it would eliminate the stress of worrying about your gear, because I see all the time like bands getting their shit stolen and you get to sleep with your gear. I mean, even if you guys were like tent camping, no one's gonna fucking steal your stuff in like in a campsite.
Right. Yeah, especially with the van so nearby. Yeah, I think that's the number one thing for me. Like, I had a scare in November when I played in San Francisco, and my window got smashed out of my van while we were in the venue playing. And luckily, like, none of the gear was in the van, and none of that was stolen. But they stole like our clothes, all of our clothes for like that whole trip.
Oh my God,
we were like
dude.
3 days into the tour. My friend Joshua, who does Entresol, and I. Yeah, so it could have been a lot worse. And ever since then, I'm just like, you know, anything could happen in such a small amount of time. I'd rather, you know, instead of lugging all the gear into someone's house at like 2 a.m. and like waking people up and just doing that after a show and being tired already and then doing it again in the morning, it's just like easier to find the safest spot to park and just sleep in the van. And I know a lot of people are just doing that, and it's smart. It's not the most comfortable, but...
Absolutely, man. So is this something that you've done on other tours or no?
Not really. No. In November, we mostly had places to stay every night, and if we didn't, we would get a hotel room. We did not sleep in the van overnight, I don't think once on that tour. But yeah, my tour mate this time around was just like way down to do that. So there's an interesting dynamic too, just depending on who you're sharing a vehicle with. It's like, you know, I'm really open to whatever. So I would actually prefer just like sleeping in the van, being close to the gear.
Out west at this time of the year, what's the weather like in Oregon and the West Coast?
This time of year, it's pretty rainy and cold. Although this past week, since I got back, there's been some really sunny days, and some flowers started blooming the other day, actually. And I don't know, that's a little alarming considering it's, you know, just February, but it's just mostly cold and wet this time of year.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was like, fuck, what's the weather situation like when you're camping like that? But if you're in your van, it probably wasn't an issue, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, and so on the road, like, I don't know, out south, like in Arizona and like Southern California, we didn't really experience much wet weather. So it gets cold at night down there and then somewhat warmer throughout the day. So it's just like we have like these, you know, rated for like 30 degrees sleeping bags that we would just like slither into and then just roll the seat back and just like sleep that way. And it was fine. We really didn't hit much bad weather on the whole trip besides just like leaving Oregon. We had to kind of dodge this snowstorm that was happening. Like, tried to leave a day early and we drove through a tiny part of it, but we missed the most of it. So
that's awesome, man, that you guys had pretty much good weather. Are you typically an avid camper? Do you like to camp a lot or no?
I do love to camp, but I definitely don't do it as much as I would have liked to in the recent years. Like a couple of years back, I bought a whole bunch of backpacking gear, and I did like a backpacking trip out in the Columbia Gorge here in Oregon. Hiked up 8 miles and set up camp and then just hiked back the next morning. And I love doing that shit, but I hope to do that more this year.
Hell yeah, dude. So my wife and I are both super into camping and hiking, and we backpack, and every spring and summer we'll do camping and hiking trips, but at least once a year we'll take like a pretty lengthy, basically camping trip. So when I saw that you were doing it, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, man, that's awesome. Was there a spot that you went to that was your favorite place to camp out?
Yeah. So after our Bisbee, Arizona show, we met some people there, and they were just like, they happened to be visiting Bisbee from Tucson, and they were just like partying the whole night. And then afterwards, they're like, we know a spot you could crash, like follow us out there. It's like a 10-minute drive from the city. And we're just like, you know, okay, let's do it. Like, this sounds fun. We get there, it's like, lift up a barbed wire gate and like put it aside, drive through this dirt road that's smaller than the van, and then this little tiny parking space that you have to kind of make. And he's like, yeah, park there. And we just did it. And it was so late. We didn't see anything around us because it was so dark out, except the stars. But when we woke up in the morning, it's just this gorgeous, like, Arizona grassy desert landscape. Waking up to that was just incredible. I really like Arizona. At least the landscape and the nature there. Something about it just kind of resonated with me on this trip and the past trip.
Yeah, I went to Arizona. Man, it's got to be like 10, 11 years ago now, and I was blown away by the landscape. It was so fucking beautiful.
Yeah, it is awesome. Especially like, I don't know, in Tucson, there's this hill. Pardon me for forgetting the name. It's the one everybody goes to climb and bike up or walk up, and it's just like they have some of the largest cactuses you've ever seen, and then just the view up top is amazing. And yeah, it struck a chord with me.
So I went to Phoenix and hung around that area, and then I took a drive to Sedona, which was incredible. And I'm not a religious person, but I wound up going to this church, and I can't remember the name of the church, where it's like basically built into this like rock face, and then surrounding it is just the desert and these like rock pillars. It was fucking incredible, man. It was so awesome.
Yeah, there's some, like, I don't know, there's some real gems out there that you can come across. I was happy to just pull off the side of the road and just enjoy like a view and a cactus.
I gotta say, man, I'm jealous of any of the West Coasters that I get to have on the show or I get to meet and speak to, because regardless of what anyone tells you about the East Coast, the West Coast landscape is just insane. Some of the places that I've got to go to and camp and hike at have been incredible. I haven't gone to Oregon yet, but that's on the list of places to go.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the landscape just changes, like the terrain changes in such short distances out here, I feel. You don't have to go very far to find like a whole different sort of landscape or beautiful part of nature that's very close to the next.
Yeah, man. When I was because my wife and I a couple years back went to California, and it was kind of wild to go to certain areas where it's like sort of deserty, and then you're in like Yosemite, and then from Yosemite going to like Sequoia and Kings Canyon, and it was snowing. It was just wild as hell. Of all the places I've gone to parks wise, I would say Yosemite is probably my favorite, just because of how big the park is and just like how insane El Capitan and Half Dome are. They're incredible to see, but then just some of the more like less visited parts of the park are also insane. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean to. To
go back to touring and performing, so when you're performing, are you performing solo?
Usually that's the thing, just by default. I've never really been able to like put together a band for this project, although that is something I've always been open to, and I have been and still am talking to some friends about it. But this past tour was the first time that I would really collaborate with Tom Aslan, who does Shifting Harbor. For most of these shows, we played as a two-piece as Folian. It was cool. He would mic my guitar, and he would take a line out of my vocal effects as well, and then he would just run it through his effects pedal board and manipulate it. And he would also add some of his own vocals through like this radio mic that he has hooked up to his effects as well. And he had some various instrumentation on his table. So it was really cool to just have that extra textural element to the live setting. Very collaborative and sort of improvised.
So like when you were first figuring that shit out, like performing your music solo, how did you figure out like all the logistics and the technical stuff that went into that so that you could capture the sound that you wanted to?
Lots of trying different ways. I feel like up until recently, it's been a constant ongoing experiment. I used to just run I would pre-record things and mix them at home, and then I would just kind of like load them into a sampler pedal or a loop pedal and then trigger these tracks live to get like the drums and the other layers. But and then I would just run them all through my guitar. But that wasn't the sound that I was going for. It wasn't as dynamic as it needed to be. So now I run that stuff direct into a mixer, and then my own PA that I bring with me every show. And then the guitar is all separate. I don't know, like having my own mix for the samples, the synth, and the vocals, and then just having the guitar separate seems to be the best way I've found to do it live, solo.
I gotta say, man, that shit, like, that stuff is so over my head and just like completely blows me away. To see someone perform and then to be able to have a multi-layered sort of a sound where you've got synth stuff going, guitar, vocals, drums, like that stuff just like totally blows me away. So yeah, I would imagine it had to have taken a good chunk of time to like figure all that shit out, right?
Yeah, it's mostly like a lot of the drum tracks also hold some of the other textures that I want in the live experience that I just simply can't replicate on the spot while I'm playing guitar. So I'll like write these songs and record them and mix them, and then I'll bounce out these separate tracks for a live version into a sampler, and then I'll trigger that live. It's many different, like, I have like 2 or 3 sources going at any different time of just triggered tracks at different points in the song, and then some live looping as well. But everything is self-contained. I do it because I was playing different venue to venue. Is you never know what you're gonna get, especially just so much sound coming from one person. So I like to just like know what I'm gonna get, bring it all, and then at least that way, you know, I know what to expect to some degree.
Yeah, I was going to ask, man, like performing solo or performing with, you know, another person or some other people for this project, which would you prefer, and which do you feel like is less stressful for you?
It's always less stressful when another person is up there with me because, for obvious reasons, I think most solo performers would probably agree that any little mistake is harder to mask when it's just you, and, you know, it could throw things off, but having the energy and the extra just sound coming from another person when you're performing is like you can feed off each other. It's not always better, but it's different. There are some things I really, really like about performing solo, and I think I'm realizing that it's just a matter of what material am I going to do that with. Some songs I'm realizing work way better with other instrumentation and maybe other people up there with me, and that's something I'm mindful of as I go forward into possibly working with other people for a live version of the project.
I give you credit, man, because I feel like, take this from someone who's never performed music live for other people, but I feel like when you're on stage with other people, right, the attention that gets put on you gets divided amongst other people. So that alone, I would imagine, alleviates some of that stress. And now when it's just you up there, you're responsible for everything. The attention is solely on you. So I imagine the stress is just so much more elevated.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. With this project, like, it's a very personal project. So, you know, to some degree, it's like, I don't want any other instrumentation to take away focus from the guitar and the vocals, but rather just like add necessary layers and just a different version of the material. I wouldn't really ever want to replicate live the way things sound on a record.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man, because this came up recently online. I was reading something and people were talking about, how do you feel about our live performance? Does it have to be a complete replication of the song's recording, or are you okay with it being at least somewhat different? And I never kind of thought about that. And afterwards I was thinking about it, and some of the coolest sets that I've seen, or some of the coolest shows that I've seen, is when bands, it's obviously they're playing that song, but they add something unique to it, or they do something that I wasn't expecting, and it adds a completely different layer to it than I had anticipated, which I really fucking appreciate.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like some bands it works well for them, you know, just trying to play the songs and do the thing as tight as possible, and it really works for that kind of sound. But for me, it's like I need to be doing something a little different in order to keep myself interested, I think. And it's always going to come out differently than it is recorded, because, you know, the energy just varies like show to show. And there is a degree of improvisation that I like to weave into each of my sets.
Let's switch gears here a little, because I want to talk about your recent album, Blue Mirror, which is such a fantastic album, man. I got to give you props because it's such a solid album. And it just came out. So, you know, what sort of emotions or thoughts go through your head as you're getting ready to release new music out into the world?
I don't know. This record has been a while in the making. I have released other music during its creation, and There were times where I just sat on it for a while, or I went back to it and kept adding things, just little things. And then it came to a point where it's just like, I'm ready. This needs to be released. Like, I need to put this out there. And while I still feel good about it, and I need to move on. So by the time Blue Mirror was coming out, you know, I was touring up to the release, and I felt really good about it. And I felt in that moment, like, playing those songs, still very connected to it, and like, this is the time to do it. And now that it's out, and I've done all these shows, I'm really ready to like just move on to the next thing. But it's been a very healthy thing. It's been a good experience building up to, and then finally releasing this thing.
Yeah, I saw that you had posted that it took some time to finally release Blue Mirror. So, you know, what made you hold off on finally releasing the album?
I don't know. So, I mean, for years before this project was named Folian, it was called Wasting Seasons, and I was working on this album at that time, you know, over 3 years ago. I probably finished most of this record a year and a half ago, had it mastered, made some demos, just sent to like a few labels just to try and see how am I going to release this thing, you know. I cared so much about it. I could just release it myself, but it would be maybe better to see it have a little bit better of a treatment. And just waiting on that, I would listen back and I would hear things and I would want to change things, and I just felt like I wasn't done with it. So I kept going back to the record and making changes, and then finally came to a point where like it felt finished, and then it needed to be remastered. And then I was just like, I'm not waiting on this any longer. I'm gonna start planning the release. And at the time I had finished it, I immediately started making new music, and I wanted to release something before Blue Mirror, and I wanted to get it out there so that I can, you know, play shows, push myself. I started recording this stuff, and it all flowed so quickly and sort of naturally, and that became Ache Pillars, and that was done in like less than 2 months, and that was the thing I wanted to put out first.
What I find so interesting, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine just this last week. He does solo stuff, and he also is in a band, and he had mentioned to me the fact that sometimes releasing his solo stuff, it is almost like paralysis by analysis. He's working on things, and it's a constant like tweaking and retweaking because he wants to put out everything so perfectly. But then with his band, it's like you have to rely on your band members and have faith on what you guys are putting together. And when you're working on your music, and since this is a solo project, and especially with, you know, something like Blue Mirror, do you feel like that can be the case for you, that, you know, you're refining stuff and you're constantly tweaking things and working on things, that it becomes almost like, holy shit, this is like dragging out way longer than I expected? But then you're mentioning Ache Pillars, and it was done over about a couple month long period. So I guess maybe it just depends. It just depends
on the intention behind the work. And sometimes those intentions yield different results. Blue Mirror was a very specific, focused work. And I guess there's just a big part of me that exactly felt like this needs to be right. You know, I can't let this one go just without feeling like it's finished and doing what I feel is right for it. But like other times, when you set limitations, you're going to get different results, but it could also be really great. And I feel really good about the process of writing and recording Ache Pillars. It was done so quickly, and technically that's the newer material, though it came out first. I like that approach to writing as well and recording. It just depends on, you know, what you're trying to do. But it's definitely like the case where doing it alone, yeah, you can get stuck in your own head about things. You can take as much time as you want to try and get to this point where you can finally take the next step. Or as opposed to being in a band, it's more like you're working with other people who all want to make something great, but get it out there and keep going, you know, and I know how that goes too. So it's definitely different.
Dude, I gotta commend you, man, because Eight Pillars is fucking awesome too. And when I listened to Blue Mirror for the first time, my thought was, all right, this is going to be a full-length album that's going to sound quite similar to Eight Pillars. And I immediately realized, nope, that's not the case. That it's a heavier sound. And I totally got like Jesu vibes when I was listening to it, and I was like, fuck yes. So when you were working on Blue Mirror, was that your intent? Did you want to write an album or write music that was more heavy, or did that wind up just kind of like coming out as you were working on those songs?
Yeah, I think like up to the point I started writing that record, like most of the songs I had been writing were all acoustic. And like, you know, I played in some heavier bands and I listened to a lot of heavy music, and that naturally just started to become what sound I wanted to create. And really, I just wanted to create like heavy, emotionally driven music, but with like a sort of psychedelic quality to it without being too obvious. This became the sound that I was like striving towards. With Blue Mirror, it was like songs that they needed to be. Whereas like, I don't know, like looking back on Eight Pillars, I almost don't even know what those are. They're songs, but they don't feel like very specific works. It was way more of an improvised recording process, and therefore I feel like it was just a little freer that way.
Interesting. So do you feel that Blue Mirror is a little bit more of a cohesive body of work or body of songs as opposed to Eight Pillars?
I mean, I think they both are. I think I spent more time on Blue Mirror thinking about that. So I consider that to be like the cohesive work that I had. But I also like did Eight Pillars with Blue Mirror in mind. Like the idea was to kind of tie them together. Sound-wise, those two albums sound completely different. I think that listening to them in that order, it makes sense. And that was my goal, really. That's how I was able to make the two cohesive. There are elements that repeat themselves throughout both works. I think that kind of generally just exists within the music I make anyway. But yeah, I definitely spent more time with Blue Mirror, I think.
Dude, I have to say, to go back to Eight Pillars, fucking the last track on it, Where All This Dust Comes From. Dude, that was like one of my favorite songs from last year. That song is so fucking good, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that might, like, it's a short, album, so like to pick a favorite from it, But I think that one might be my favorite off that collection. And it's actually an old song I wrote like maybe 7 years ago and released a very different version of it as Wasting Seasons. That was the one that I came back to totally transform and re-record for Eight Pillars. So that was the only part of that recording that had any previously written material that wasn't new. But it's way different.
On Blue Mirror, do you have a song that is your favorite for whatever reason?
I think maybe No Wake, which is the mostly acoustic song. I've never played that song live, and I probably couldn't explain why I would choose that as a favorite, but I feel particularly good about that song for some reason.
I was reading on your Bandcamp that you self-recorded and mixed the Blue Mirror album, but when I read that, I was just like, damn, dude, that is awesome as fuck. What made you want to go that route with the album?
Just naturally happened that way. I learned how to record and mix years and years back, just through experimentation, and then I went to school for it in New York, and when I got out of school, I realized that I wanted to take most of everything I learned and instead of apply it like professionally, just focus in on my own work. And so almost all the music I'm ever involved with, I have a sort of a major hand in the recording process and the mixing. Mastering something I don't touch, but I feel like I'm able to have complete control doing it that way, and I can take my time, and I'm not paying somebody else to achieve things that might not be able to achieve through just trusting someone else.
Yeah, man, I feel like money alone would make me want to like figure out the whole recording process and like just so I could do it myself and save money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, recording gear can get pretty expensive, but you can do so much with such minimal gear too.
Yeah. Dude, so I have no clue like what the fuck goes into mixing and mastering music. So what's involved with like mixing? Is it just like basically putting the song to structuring the song so it works from like start to finish? Like I have no clue how that works.
Yeah, well, there's like, so you record the thing, at least I do. This is the way I do it. I record tracks and then edit them, like take out what I don't like or unwanted noises. And then I generally bring all these tracks to a level where they should sit. And then I start just making changes to all of these instruments and the vocals and just kind of like, try adding some effects, toggle certain sounds till it just feels right. Most of what I know about audio, I let go of a lot of the technicality behind it, and I learned the tools, and I just know how to make it sound and feel right, and I trust my intuition that way, and that is what gets the result. Ultimately, just trusting your ears and what feels right, and also like just what makes sense.
So with mastering then, like is mastering basically just like fine tuning everything and touching up stuff so that it sounds basically like a good quality? Is that how mastering would work?
Basically, at least my understanding of it, it's like, I'm done with this. I trust you to make it, to open it up, be a little more dynamic and louder, and also like technically acceptable for whatever format it is intended for. Yeah, it's amazing mastering, but it's just something that, it's a whole nother animal, I think, than to someone who's just interested in recording and mixing.
Dude, so like, do you ever take a second to be like, man, I've figured out like how to perform music by myself and record and mix stuff and like think about all the technical ability it takes to do some of that shit and kind of like give yourself a pat on the back?
I guess I don't stop often enough to really absorb that, but yeah, it feels good when I reflect on all this stuff and I think like, wow, I did that. It's also great to work with other people. Like I love working with other people and I love my bandmates I play with in my bands and anyone I collaborate with. I love that about music as well. It's just for this project in particular for me, it's my just zone to kind of do whatever I want with. And that is a whole nother feeling.
Oh, I'm sure, man. So to go back to Blue Mirror, I want to talk about some of the themes and the lyrics. So if you had to describe thematically as far as the lyrics go, how would you describe some of the themes and topics that Blue Mirror delves into?
I'm going to keep it sort of vague. Love, confusion, stagnation, procrastination, sorrow, healing, and balance. That's the bulk of it.
Is it tough for you to write lyrics?
Kind of. It's my least favorite part of making the music. But, just because I really do try, and I don't consider myself much of a writer. So when it comes to writing lyrics, it's an effort. I made this music. The music always comes first, I feel. And then I want the vocals to be another instrument. But I want the words to make sense. I don't want them to be just like, another blurb of cheesy words. So I really do try and dig deep and think about where the music comes from and how it makes me feel and what it makes me think about. And that's how I find meaning in it. And that becomes the lyrics.
It's funny, man. That's a common thing that I hear people that come onto the podcast say, that the lyrics either are like a last part of the equation or like it's almost like a necessary evil.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So one of the other things I wanted to ask you, man, is the album art, because I really like the art that you chose for the album's cover. How did you come up with that?
My friend Dylan Garrett Smith, who I've worked with on various other projects before, I trusted him with the artwork and the design for the record, and I basically just gave him a couple very vague themes and elements to kind of vibe with, and I just trusted him to come up with it, and he did the photography for it, and the first thing he showed me was what became the album cover, and it just nailed it for me, I think. There's a big water theme that's woven into the record, and sort of nailed it with that artwork. I really love his artwork, and he's mostly an illustrator, but sometimes does photography work, and especially for a lot of the releases I put out or work with on my label. And so I love his photography.
That's really cool, man. And yeah, dude, that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk to you about the fact that you do have a record label, which is awesome as hell, man. And so I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Is it pronounced Anima Recordings?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was reading, I was like, it can't be Anima. So I was like, it's got to be fucking Anima. When did you wind up starting the record label?
Wild to think about. I think that would have been November 2013. I started it with my friend Uriah. We had just, we were playing together in a couple projects, and we'd always thrown around the idea of releasing our own music, but, you know, we really like to get crafty and like make things. So we wanted to make CDs and tapes, and we just wanted to release our projects, and we just started doing it. He kind of developed loosely the visual aesthetic that stuck with the label, and then over time it just became a thing where I was working more and more on it, and he had a lot of other things going on, so he kind of let go of it, and ever since then it's just been me. I started working with some other artists, some other bands after I had moved out to Portland here, and I'm on like the 21st release now, I think. So it's been a lot of fun getting to work with other artists, and you know, it's a small endeavor, and I do it for fun. I do it because I love sharing the music. I only work with self-recorded, home-recorded DIY artists and releases. So it's just another part of music that I really enjoy. That's really cool, man. Is it, when you first started putting everything together for the label, was it tough to do so, or is it just kind of like what we've been talking about with the music, like just trial and error, you figure shit out as you go? Yeah, pretty much. I didn't know what I was doing. I still kind of don't. It costs a lot of money to like really do it right too. So for many of the earlier releases, it was just, we were doing things ourselves. And as far as like actual manufacturing, we were like burning CDRs, printing all the inserts and stuff ourselves. And then once it was kind of left up to me solely, I started reaching out and having other companies like manufacture the tapes and the CDs. And just this past year, started doing vinyl, which is also very expensive. Dude, my last episode I had on Tom Waslook from Planning for Burial, and then two of the dudes from the band Lacing, and we started talking about how much it costs to do just like a small run of vinyl records, and like that blew my mind. I think they told me it's like for 100 or 200, it was like $2,500 for a 12-inch, which was just like, holy fuck, dude. Yeah, that's pretty standard. It's pretty wild. I did 200 for Blue Mirror, ended up being 220, but actually I ended up paying it was around $2,000. It was a little cheaper than what they're saying, but I guess it just depends who you go through as well. I also eliminated the shipping because I pressed through Cascade, that's based out of Portland here, and I went to go pick up the order myself, so there was no shipping involved with that. Damn, man. So like when you get a record, and I'm assuming like when you get the final pressing of like your record, it's got to be such like an amazing feeling, right? Knowing that like you've created this thing and now it's been made into a physical piece of fucking music that people can then listen to. I'm assuming that's got to be such an awesome feeling.
even for just stuff that you're releasing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Blue Mirror is the first music of mine to ever make it to vinyl. So I feel, I'm 29 years old, and there came a point where I started to wonder, is this ever going to happen? and going there and picking up the records, it was like, this finally fucking happened. It was a celebratory experience.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Kudos to you, dude. Like I said, man, the fact that you could perform your music, write all this stuff, put out music and have a record label, it's pretty goddamn awesome, man. So, dude, we were talking earlier today because when we were like getting shit ready to do this, and I noticed your area code was 570, which for those who don't know, that is a Pennsylvania area code. And so I lived in the Poconos for like 6 or 7 years or some shit. And we started talking. So you lived where in the Poconos?
So I grew up in East Stroudsburg, and then I lived in Canadensis. Yeah, smaller town, but yeah, that's the area I'm familiar with. I grew up there.
Oh my God, dude. So yeah, I lived in Tannersville, and we talked about like Camelback Mountain, and you'd mentioned working at Camel Beach, and dude, so my buddies and I we did this for like 2 summers. We would sneak into Camel Beach almost like every day.
Yeah, that's what a place. I worked there for like 3 summers, like starting when I was 18. Yeah, it was like one of my first jobs.
That's fucking awesome, dude. And like what's crazy too is like when I think about this now, I used to see shows, I can't remember the name of the venue, but there was a venue in Stroudsburg that I would go see shows at. I would go to Wilkes-Barre a lot to see shows, and then sometimes to like Allentown and maybe like Bethlehem or some of the surrounding cities. But like Wilkes-Barre, when I lived in Pennsylvania, there was actually like a pretty good fucking music scene in Wilkes-Barre. So more often than not, I would wind up going to Wilkes-Barre for shows.
Yeah, that is where Cafe Metro was.
Yeah, dude.
I only ever got to go to 2 shows there. I feel like, most of my friends growing up when I started getting into like hardcore and metal, they had been doing it for years before I was getting into it. So like I heard so many tales of all these venues that I never actually got to experience a lot of, but I did make it to Metro a couple times. And there was Underworld in Stroudsburg.
Yes, dude. So yeah, like
never got to actually see a show there.
I believe I've shared this story on here before. So that was the first place I ever went to a show, was at Underworld. And like one of the first shows, this was so fucking long ago, man, but like one of the first shows I went to at the Underworld, I saw 25 to Life there, and fucking Rick to Life had his distro there. Yeah. Oh my God, dude. Yeah. The Underworld was wild. Dude, Cafe Metro was fucking awesome because it was like, it probably only held maybe 150, 200 people. So like I remember seeing certain shows where like it was filled to capacity and it was just fucking insane in there.
Yeah, same. I saw Fear Before the March of Flames there, like right when they were touring the Always Open Mouth, and it was pretty packed. That was the last time I think I ever been there. So wow, that place,
dude. So you might remember better than I do. Was there a town called Nazareth in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
So for some reason, I feel like this show was in Nazareth, but I could be wrong. It could have been like in Bethlehem or one of the other like surrounding cities. This had to have been 2003, 2004. Like one of the craziest fucking shows I have ever seen was American Nightmare, Hope Conspiracy, and I believe Converge. I believe that's what the tour was. But dude, it was this like fucking skate park that they were playing in, and there was like this skate park. It's almost like hard to explain. Like there was a skate park on like the second level on the outside of not the outside, on like the far right of the building was almost like a docking bay kind of area, but you could get to that from the skate park area. So the docking bay would be like on the first floor, the skate park would be on the second floor, and there was like a banister where you could look over the second floor down into like the docking bay area. And so the docking bay area was where the fucking show was going on, dude. And it was wild as fuck as people were jumping over the banister on the second floor on top of everyone below. It was was wild as fuck. To this day, like one of the wildest shows I've ever seen.
I feel like I've heard about that place, and I can't recall ever actually being at a place quite like that.
Yeah, I could not remember the name of it for the life of me, but fucking crazy.
Yeah, there were some cool places to see shows around that time.
Shit, when did you wind up moving to the West Coast?
Early 2015. So like this month, I've been here 5 years. Yeah.
Do you ever miss the East Coast at all or no?
Sometimes, and I still visit, at least once every like 2 years. And every time I'm there, I see family for like 1 or 2 days, and then I see my friends for like 1 or 2 days. They've always been short visits. But then after that, I feel like, after 3 or 4 days, I feel like I've had enough and I'm ready to go. It's like, like I can absorb it and I can appreciate it from afar, but it's not where I want to live, at least not in this point. Just because, I've been there my whole life. Some people just like that, I came out to Portland to visit for a week and then just decided like this was the way I wanted to go. But I still appreciate Pennsylvania, and I still have a lot of good friends there, and I have love for Pennsylvania for sure.
I'm sorry if any of you that are listening are from Pennsylvania, but so I live in Rochester, and most of my family now lives like in or around the New York City area. And one of the quickest ways to get down to New York City from Rochester, New York, is to go through the Poconos. And I refuse to drive that route anymore because I'm just like, oh, I don't want to think about my time in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I've had some dark times in the Poconos, and, being back there brings back a lot of things that I can only take for so long. That's wild. Yeah, you mentioned Tom Wasluck. I met him before I moved out here. He came and played like my going away show at the studio I used to have in Canadensis. So that's how we first connected. Yeah, man,
he still he lives in Wilkes-Barre, and I'm just like, so I've only gone back to that area because of Tom and Planning for Barry. Like he's played some shows in Wilkes-Barre and has put on some shows where what was it, last summer? I think it was last summer was the first time I had been back to that area in 15 years or so. And it was so weird. So when I went there, I had to find fucking Cafe Metro. I was like, I want to go to the area where this fucking place was. And it was something else. It's not there anymore.
It's gone. I miss Philly. I used to go to Philly all the time for a lot of my shows. And I played in a band that we used to practice in Philly. And then, I went to school in New York for like almost a year. So I spent a lot of time in those two cities as well. And those cities tend to be like what I miss most, I think, about the areas of the East Coast. I guess I'm just kind of a city person. Yeah, I had considered like moving there before making the decision to come out to the Pacific Northwest. But it was after my visit here, it was pretty much a no-brainer. Like, I didn't want to live in Philly.
Well, fuck, man. Enough Pennsylvania talk. What have you been listening to lately?
Oh, man. A lot of friends' music. I'm really grateful to have a lot of friends making awesome music, and I try and involve myself in that world and stay connected that way. The new Amulets record is really great. Lately, there's this band, I think it's pronounced Hexes, HXXS, really weird electronic stuff. They put out a record last year. It was really, really good stuff. That band Senza that I think I showed you through a message or something. Yeah, they're great.
Dude, so awesome. So fucking awesome, man.
Yeah, that album's excellent. Yeah, I just go back and forth between like exploring new things that I'm usually always really late to get to. Most of the time I'm just like consumed in my own little music world and doing my own thing. But I often, just reach out to listen to lot of stuff that's happening in my area, because there's really a lot, and there's a lot of good stuff too.
So I've had Kyle from Drowse on the podcast a few times, and like we've just talked about Portland and the music scene there. There's so many fucking cool artists and bands putting out really awesome stuff from Portland.
Yeah, there really is. Kyle's a great friend of mine. I played in Drowse for a brief moment. Man, I love that project. That was like one of the first bands I heard from Portland, like when I moved out here. I remember just like listening to his Soon Asleep EP, like, or I think maybe he considers it his first album. I'm not sure, but I was just like, wow, like, yeah, I this is special. I need to meet this guy. I've discovered so much good music out here through friends like that, and there's a lot of special stuff out here.
That's cool. Yeah, so like you mentioned Amulets. I had never heard Amulets before until Kyle did that split with him. Yeah, and I was like, oh shit, this is pretty fucking good.
Yeah, he's excellent. I think you got to see him live too. I think he's from Austin, Texas originally, but just moved out here a couple of years ago. I first met and played with him when I was playing in Drowse, and Planet for Burial was out here touring. We played a show with Amulets and my other band, Canadensis. It was an excellent show, and just like seeing him play live was really meditative. And I had him play the Blue Mirror release show that just happened last weekend, so it was really good to see him play again, and that's a special project. And he's on tour with This Will Destroy You right now, which is rad. He's doing really cool things.
That's awesome. I love This Is Destroy. They're such a great band.
Yeah.
So fuck, man. You just released Blue Mirror, and you've just done a tour that you got back from. But do you have anything else coming up in the next couple weeks, next couple months?
Yeah. So show-wise, later this month, it's I'm playing with Thief and Jason Walton here in Portland at High Water Mark. I have a few shows in the works right now for springtime. I'm playing drums in a band called Flood Peak. I'm doing a duo collaborative project called Canadensis with my friend Tom, who does Shifting Harbor, that I just toured with, and we're trying to set up some shows. As for Folian, there's a couple collaborations and releases in the works right now. You know, after finally getting my my space here set up, I'm really looking forward to just like sinking into creating some new stuff right now, and working on some new creations.
Oh yeah, man. I'm
open to whatever.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast and shooting the shit with me. And dude, I so enjoyed Eight Pillars last year, and since hearing Blue Mirror for the first time, I've been listening to it a bunch. It's such a great album. So yeah, congratulations on putting out such a stellar album, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
So straight up, when I went back to Wilkes-Barre for the first time, it was almost 2 years ago now. I went back to Wilkes-Barre to see Planning for Burial play, and after the set, I drove around Wilkes-Barre and went and visited Cafe Metro because I had to. So it was kind of surreal and kind of weird, but also kind of cool. I've since gone back to Wilkes-Barre a couple of other times to see Tom play in some other shows that Tom was putting on. But yeah, my wife and I, whenever we go downstate to New York City, we will totally not drive through Pennsylvania. So sorry to those of you that are listening that are from Pennsylvania or live in the Poconos or northeastern PA. Sorry, guys. I will make sure to add links in the show notes to how you could listen to Blue Mirror, listen to Folian's music, how you can cop some of Folian's merch. So make sure to do that. As I mentioned, Blue Mirror is a really solid album. I think you'll dig it if you're into a lot of the other bands and acts that I've had on the show. And if you're into the Flenser, I think that this will definitely be music that'll be right up your alley. So if you haven't checked out Folian, definitely get on that because you'll enjoy it. If you guys have not subscribed to the show, rate the show if you can. Let me know what you guys think of Folian. But with that said, guys, you know the drill. Get out there, create something cool. I will see you next time.